Tanzania, the sun doesn't warm. It hangs over the savanna like a fiery blade, cutting deep into the land below day after day. The ground cracks into long fissures. The grass withers to the horizon. The air vibrates in a wave of heat. Here, life and death are not separated by days, but by a single wrong moment. This is a colossal arena, and the terrain is the rules of the game. The Great Rift Valley opens like an ancient scar on the Earth's surface. The Ngorongoro crater lies deep within the Earth, a self-contained world, magnificent yet also a natural trap. The Serengeti stretches endlessly, where millions of creatures must constantly move just to survive. Far on the horizon, Kilimanjaro stands cold and solitary. Dividing this land into different layers of existence, the harsh land creates a harsh climate. Water and food are unevenly distributed, abundant in some places and scarce in others. And this disparity forces every species, from the largest elephant to the smallest insect, to choose their own way of life. No species is exempt, because in Tanzania, this land does not hunt any species. It simply silently presents challenges, forcing everyone to face them. Two white rhinos clash, neither willing to surrender territory. Massive horns collide, sending dust across the dry plain. Territory disputes erupt between powerful white rhino bulls. One dominant bull forces his rival into retreat. Every battle decides ownership of precious grazing grounds. The dry season arrives quietly. It comes in silence as water holes dry up and young grass disappears from the ground. Initially, nothing collapses immediately. It just diminishes little by little, and with it, living space shrinks. Herds of herbivores are forced to move further and further away. They move not because they want to, but because staying still means accepting exhaustion. For species like zebras or buffalo, their bodies need water almost every day. They can't stay away from water for too long, but the closer they get to water, the more they're drawn into a narrower circle of danger. On this savanna, the first danger doesn't come from the claws of predators. It comes from the very scarcity of water. Nature is the silent killer pushing everyone to the brink. When the water recedes, species that used to keep their distance from each other are drawn to the same area. Buffaloes, zebras, antelopes. Elephants, they all revolve around one thing: water. And where prey congregates, lions and hyenas begin to arrive. They understand that their prey has no choice but to return to drink. A thirsty lion pauses as a crocodile approaches the water's edge. And beneath the remaining water, crocodiles simply wait. The lion stands firm, guarding its place at the waterhole. The crocodile rises quietly, challenging the lion's confidence. Neither animal is willing to leave the precious water. The dry season turns every water hole into shared territory. Both remain alert, reading each other's slightest movement. After a tense moment, each holds its own ground. In the African dry season, even a drink demands caution. And when the prey gathers, the predator gets an opportunity it never had during the rainy season. A once vast and tranquil land gradually closed in, forming a trap around its last remaining water source. And where life gathered, death also began to lurk. Deep beneath the Tanzanian highlands lies a world almost completely isolated from the rest of the savanna. This is Ngorongoro, the remnant of a massive volcano that collapsed millions of years ago, leaving behind a basin hundreds of meters deep, enclosed by sheer cliffs like a fortress. Within that wall lies a world of its own: grass, water, herds of animals and predators lurking. Unlike the Serengeti, where countless species can migrate hundreds of kilometers, here life is confined to a closed space with almost no escape. This very abundance becomes a trap. When so many species are trapped in the same basin, hunter and prey are never too far apart. Amidst that scene, the Cape buffalo appeared. They weren't agile nor graceful, but with their nearly ton bodies, thick, curved horns joined at their foreheads like a bone shield, and fierce defensive instincts. They were considered one of Africa's most dangerous prey. They grazed slowly, but their ears always twitched, and their eyes never truly relaxed. In this cramped basin, the buffalo's vigilance never wavered. The close proximity meant the lions had countless opportunities to approach. But each opportunity came at a price. For just one thrust from those heavy horns was enough to turn a hunt into a disaster. Here, the prey didn't just run away. Sometimes it turned to face them. In the dry yellow grass, a shadow stirred, then another. The lions had been there for a long time, but until this moment, almost nothing revealed their presence. No hurry, no roar, not a single sign of ostentation. They lowered their bodies close to the ground, letting their sandy fur blend in with the sun-scorched savanna, making their entire bodies part of the landscape. The hunt didn't begin with speed, it began with silence. Lions lack the stamina for long chases. Their strength lay in their ability to get very close without being detected, and in the cold coordination of the entire pride. Hiding in the grass, closing the distance little by little, none of them rushed to attack. All were waiting for one thing. They silently approached the buffalo herd from multiple directions, moving slowly. The moment a buffalo let its guard down or separated from the group, that patience could last for hours until the final moment arrived. Then everything erupted. The buffalo discovered the danger. The whole herd panicked, pushing and shoving each other as they fled, their hooves churning up a cloud of dust. In that chaotic rush, one buffalo, slower than the others, was pushed to the edge of the herd, away from the protective circle of the entire herd. That was exactly what the lions had been waiting for hours. They charged. The weight of many bodies pressed down at once. The buffalo struggled, thrashing its horns in desperation. For it knew that a single well-aimed roar could cost the hunter its life. For a few brief seconds, the Ngorongoro Basin was filled with the scraping of hooves and the pressure of a life or death struggle. Then it all subsided. The hunt was over. For the lions, this was a reward for their patience. A victory achieved at the cost of a risk they didn't always get. One prey had fallen, and with it, a new layer of life began to unfold on the savannah. For death here was never the end. It was the beginning for others. But in nature, a meal never belongs solely to the first to claim it. The hunt was over, but the savannah wouldn't be quiet for long. The scent of the fallen prey carried far by the wind. And on this land where death is a resource, no meal can be kept secret. From the horizon, intermittent cries echoed, sounding like chilling laughter. The spotted hyenas had arrived. They didn't immediately scramble. First, they circled around, maintaining a safe distance, silently observing. How many lions were eating? Was there a large male in the pack? Was the pack full of energy or exhausted after the hunt? Each circle was a calculation. A weighing of the price to pay against the potential reward. This wasn't cowardice, this was strategy. The hyena's strength lay not in the individual, but in the collective intelligence. They lived in large packs led by females, where each individual understood their place within a strict order. They knew when to approach to exert pressure. When should you call out to draw more lions closer? And when should you retreat to wait for another opportunity? When numbers are overwhelming. Even lions holding the prey can be forced to retreat. And so the confrontation begins. Two forces stand before the same carcass. One side has just secured the meal through strength and patience. The other side has arrived through numbers, persistence, and the ability to read the situation. Between them lies a prize neither species wants to give up. Every step forward, every roar, every retreat. All of these determine who stays at the meal. This moment reveals a harsh truth. On the savannah, securing the prey is never the end. In Tanzania, even victory must be defended, beyond the enormous predators. The savannah also belongs to creatures that, at first glance, are easily underestimated. They don't possess overwhelming weight. They don't have a dominant roar. But each species holds its own unique escape route that no one can replicate. A honey badger appears, small and short. Almost out of place in the land of giants. But it doesn't live by size. It lives by almost unwavering tenacity. When danger comes, it doesn't always flee, but is ready to turn and confront even opponents many times larger. Its thick, loose skin allows it to twist and bite back even when firmly gripped, making it a creature that even lions or leopards would think twice before attacking. On the barren, rocky outcrops, another species chooses a completely different path. The hyrax, it has no sharp fangs. Its speed wasn't terrifying either. What it possessed was the terrain. Narrow crevices in the rocks became fortresses. Steep cliffs became ramparts. With just a single sound of alarm, the entire pack vanished into the rocks before predators could reach them. Where larger animals struggle to penetrate, the hyrax had a greater chance of survival. And then, hidden in the shadows of the grass, was the caracal. Its entire life force was concentrated in a single explosive moment. A leap into the air, a mid-air spin. An attack so swift it's almost imperceptible to the naked eye. It can leap high to intercept a bird just taking flight, turning speed and precision into its own unique weapons. Three species, three tiny bodies, and three completely different ways of life. One species chooses tenacity, one chooses terrain, one chooses speed. None of them are strong enough to compete directly with lions or hyenas. So each must find its own path to survival. Here, survival has no single formula. On the open ground, a Cory bustard walks leisurely. This is one of the heaviest flying birds in the world, to the point that it often chooses to walk rather than take flight. It doesn't fly fast. It doesn't have the sharp talons of an eagle. It doesn't possess the strength of a large predator. On the surface, it seemed defenseless. But when danger approached, the bird did something unexpected. It didn't run, nor did it strike. It inflated its body, its neck feathers stood on end, its wings and tail spread wide. In an instant, a seemingly harmless creature became larger, more bizarre and far more unpredictable. This wasn't a battle of strength. It was a battle of psychology. The bird didn't need to defeat the predator. It only needed to sow a moment of doubt in its opponent. Was the prey before it really as easy to devour as it appeared? On the savannah, where every attack carries inherent risk, a hunter never wants to risk something it doesn't understand. And that single moment of hesitation could be the difference between life and death. Sometimes, strength lies not in what you possess, but in what others believe you possess. Far from the Ngorongoro Basin, a colossal silhouette rises above the horizon. Kilimanjaro stands alone in the steppe, with patches of white ice clinging to its peak near the equator. But the strangest thing about this mountain isn't its height, it's the different worlds it contains within. At its base lie damp, lush, and dense forests. Higher up, the forests give way to sparse scrublands. Even higher is arid, rocky land where the winds gradually thin. And at the very top, where almost no life can survive for long, only ice, rocks, and thin air remain. Within a single mountain, Tanzania has created many completely different landscapes. And at each altitude, the rules of survival change. In the lowlands, the small antelopes live by disappearing. They don't confront each other, nor do they expose themselves to the elements in open fields. Instead, they hide in narrow trails, in thickets and shadows. Where their small size becomes an advantage rather than a disadvantage. Above, among the trees, black and white Goreza monkeys leap across the gaps with long jumps. But their role extends far beyond their own survival. As they eat fruit and move through the forest, they disperse seeds everywhere. quietly sowing the seeds for the next generation of trees and helping the forest to regenerate. Underground, warthogs dig for roots and tubers hidden beneath the soil. And on the arid, rocky slopes, the Besa antelope survives thanks to its enduring drought resistance. Able to endure long days with very little water. The higher you go, the thinner the air becomes. The temperatures become more extreme. And each species must find a different way to survive. The ecosystem here is no longer a flat expanse. It is a multi-layered system of life stacked upon one another, each layer presenting its own unique challenge. On Kilimanjaro, the higher you climb, the greater the price life pays for each breath. Back on the Serengeti Plains, the dry season has spread across the horizon. The green grass recedes from the ground, leaving behind a scorched yellow expanse stretching endlessly. Dust blankets the old paths, erasing the traces of the bountiful rainy season. And then, as if responding to a signal only they can hear, the enormous herds of animals begin to move. This is the greatest migration ever recorded on Earth. Nearly 2 million creatures set off simultaneously, forming a living river that stretches across the steppe. This is not a journey, nor a choice. It is a command deeply ingrained in instinct. An ancient urge stronger than fear. Wilden are the mainstream of this migration. They are not the most beautiful, nor the fastest, but they possess extraordinary endurance and a strange ability. To sense the rain from tens of kilometers away, to follow the scent of life carried by the wind. They move along paths etched into the memory of the entire species. Passed down from generation to generation, leading them back to where the grass is still green. But the price of this journey is paid with the smallest lives. During the migration season, hundreds of thousands of young are born almost simultaneously. Just minutes after birth, a young wildebeest had to struggle to its feet on trembling legs and immediately run to join the herd. On the Serengeti, there is no time for hesitation. A slow-moving calf, a calf separated from its mother, is a calf unlikely to survive. When a massive herd moves, the weakest are always the most exposed. Young, inexperienced calves, exhausted old individuals. wounded individuals lagging behind, all become weak points in the flow. And those weak points never escape the eyes of the predator. Silently from the flanks of the migration, familiar shadows begin to follow, patiently waiting for a moment when the flow falters. As the entire savanna moves, so do the shadows of the predator. Amidst the sea of dust and light, zebras emerge with their striking black and white stripes. Looking at each individual zebra, the stripes are clearly defined. But when the whole herd runs together, something strange happens. The boundaries between the individuals begin to blur, merging into a moving mass that is difficult to distinguish. The stripes are not just for adornment. In the moment a predator needs to lock onto a single target, this visual confusion can cause them to hesitate a beat, and sometimes a beat is enough. But the role of the zebra goes far beyond self-preservation. They graze on tough, old grass that many other species cannot digest, clearing the way for the young grass underneath to grow. In doing so, they inadvertently open the way for herds of wildebeest and gazelles to follow behind. They ensure that the entire migratory line has food along the way. Following the zebras are the antelopes, each with its own strategy. Thompson's antelopes rely on speed and lightning-fast changes of direction, making them unpredictable for predators. Grant's antelopes choose a different path, surviving on their enduring drought resistance, allowing them to travel further when water becomes scarce. And impalas rely on explosive leaps and quick reflexes, along with warning signals that spread throughout the herd in an instant when danger arises. No single species is capable of carrying the entire massive migration. Therefore, each species plays a role. Zebras lead the way and set the pace. The antelopes provide speed, drought resistance, and vigilance. When combined, these countless seemingly chaotic individuals actually function as a single living organism, each step having its own significance. But the larger the system, the more vulnerable it becomes to attacks from all sides. When millions of prey animals travel together, no predator can stand still. The migration is not just a journey of herds of herbivores. It is also a giant moving feast across the savanna, pulling along those who live off the weaknesses of other species. Each predator pursues this lifeline in its own way. Lions patiently observe, searching for slow or isolated individuals. Leopards choose solitude, lurking in the shadows at the edge of the migration. turning silence into a weapon and waiting for prey to walk into their grasp. Wild dogs rely on endurance and coordinated teamwork, pursuing relentlessly until the prey collapses from exhaustion. The hyena, walking along the edge, reads the chaos of the herd as if reading a map. Immediately recognizing where the link is about to break. In that endless flow, the weakest always pay the price. Young animals too weak, old individuals worn out, those with disease or wounds. All are gradually separated and disappear from the herd. Each lost life is a tragedy, but at the same time, it is the savanna's way of self-purification. The remaining animals become healthier, less prone to disease. And it is precisely the brutal pressure from predators that keeps the entire ecosystem from becoming unbalanced. Because here, predator and prey are not two separate worlds. They are two sides of the same stream, bound together for millions of years. Death in Serengeti doesn't come from the outside to break life. It lies within the very mechanism of life itself. Amidst the red dust of the steppe, a different, slow rhythm of life emerged. The elephants walked calmly without haste or chaos. Each of their footsteps left a heavy imprint on the ground. As if carrying the entire history of this land. While the entire steppe raced against the thirst, the herd moved with an almost majestic serenity. Leading the herd was the oldest female elephant. She wasn't the strongest, but she possessed something more precious than strength: memory. In her mind was an invisible map drawn over decades of survival. She remembered places where there used to be water, old trails. Even distant lands that had saved the herd during the most severe droughts. When all signs of life seemed to have vanished, her memories became the hope for the entire family. Elephants move in an order deeply ingrained in their instincts. The baby elephants walked in the middle, surrounded by the adult females. The safest place in the entire herd. This wasn't just a herd, but a true family, where each member had a responsibility to the smallest lives. But even that caution had its loopholes. One baby elephant, engrossed in its exploration, fell behind by just a few meters. In the dry grass, a golden shadow spotted an opportunity. The lion crept closer. Step by step, its eyes fixed on the vulnerable prey, but it didn't get close enough. The mother elephant spun around. Her enormous ears bulged to their fullest extent. Her massive body rose like a wall, and a resounding roar ripped through the air. In an instant, the entire herd tightened its formation, encircling the calf in an impenetrable circle. Faced with the combined strength of the entire family, the lion understood it had no chance. Silently, the golden shadow retreated and dissolved into the grass. The baby elephant returned safely to the herd. It was saved not by being faster or stronger than its enemy, but by something simpler yet far more profound. On the savannah, sometimes what saves a life isn't speed, but the fact that one isn't left alone. Ahead of the migrating herd, the land suddenly came to a standstill. A river cut across the path, dividing the savannah into two halves of destiny. The water was murky, the banks muddy, and the surface strangely still, without a ripple, without a sign of life. But it was precisely this stillness that was the most terrifying warning. On the other side of the river were lush green meadows. The life the herd had traveled hundreds of miles to find. But between them and that promised land lay a deadly body of water. For beneath the murky waters, the Nile crocodiles had been waiting for this very moment. They lay motionless, their bodies submerged in mud, only their eyes and nostrils protruding like harmless floating logs. Cold-blooded creatures, crocodiles expend virtually no energy waiting. They can go without food for weeks, even months. Concentrating all their strength into a single burst of power. In each migration season, the river brings its prey right to them. On the banks, the animals huddled together, jostling and hesitating. Instinct urged them to cross, but an invisible fear held them back. They looked down at the water, hesitated. Retreated, only to be pushed back to the river's edge by the pressure of thousands of individuals behind them. There was no turning back. There was no time to hesitate. Standing still meant death, and behind them, the thirst relentlessly gnawed at them. Then one plunged into the water. In an instant, the entire herd burst forth. Hundreds of enormous bodies simultaneously plunged into the river. Their hooves churning up mud into a thick cloud of mist. The splashing water, the gasping breaths, the pounding of hooves, and the panicked cries mingled into a chaotic cacophony. The once calm surface of the river suddenly seethed with life and terror. and at that very moment the water stirred. The dark shadows rushed forward with unexpected speed, a lightning-fast bite. The enormous jaws clamped shut. And a creature was dragged down, disappearing into the murky water. But the enemies weren't just crocodiles. In the chaos, many were trampled by their own kind, swept away by the current. Or exhausted midway and sank without a single predator reaching them. Yet, the migration didn't stop. While some individuals vanished beneath the water's surface, others continued to swim, their desperate strides toward the other bank. They climbed ashore, their bodies trembling, covered in mud, but none looked back. Behind them, the river gradually calmed, the crocodiles returning to their motionless state. Patiently waiting for the next crossing, the river crossing ended, leaving behind losses and a heavy silence. This was not a complete victory for anyone. Some fell so that others could continue, and that was the familiar price life on this step always paid. There was no absolute victory on the river crossing, only those who continued to move forward. On the other side of the river, the step changed. Vast green meadows stretched before them. The air was milder, and for the first time after a long journey, the animals could spread out across a wide expanse of land without the relentless thirst. This was the reward for those who had overcome. The promised land that so many individuals had fallen so that their kind could reach. And on that new land, life began to revive. As the young grass helped the females regain their depleted strength, the breeding season arrived. In a short period of time, thousands of hatchlings were born one after another, almost simultaneously across the grasslands. These tiny creatures struggled to stand on their trembling legs. They sought their mothers by scent, by their calls. By instincts ingrained over millions of years. And just minutes after opening their eyes to the world, they had to be ready to run, for this place was not for the slow. This simultaneous birth was not a coincidence. It was a survival strategy calculated by nature itself. When so many hatchlings appear at the same time, predators, no matter how hard they try, cannot catch them all. In that vast sea of hatchlings, the majority will survive. Simply because the hunters cannot catch them all. Life protects itself through its sheer numbers. But even in this moment of resurgence, the shadow of danger never truly departed. Hope here never comes easily or completely. In Tanzania, hope doesn't come gently. It is born after dust, after blood. After murky waters and footsteps that never cease. When you step back and look at the big picture, seemingly disparate events suddenly appear as parts of the same picture. The death of prey feeds the predator. The predator eliminates the weak. They either get sick or fall behind, helping the rest of the herd to survive. When the hunt is over, hyenas and vultures continue their work. Cleaning up what's left and returning nutrients to the soil. No species in Tanzania truly lives in isolation. Elephants remember the way to water. Zebras forge paths through old grasses. Monkeys sow seeds in the forest. Crocodiles keep the river alive. Each species, large or small, is a link in the invisible network that has kept this land alive for millions of years. But the more intricate a network, the more easily it breaks when just one link disappears. Today, that ancient cycle is no longer guaranteed. The problem isn't just a dwindling lion population. A shrinking elephant herd, or a river drying up year after year. The greater threat is the gradual severance of these lifelines. Fencing, roads, and expanding settlements are fragmenting what was once a continuous strip of land. Climate change is prolonging the dry season. Water sources are being cut off. poaching and human-animal conflicts are intensifying. And when migration corridors are blocked, the entire web of life begins to crumble. Because if an animal herd cannot travel, it cannot reach the young pastures. When young grass is no longer within reach, the breeding season weakens. When offspring are scarce, predators lack food. And when predators disappear, the balance of the entire animal herd begins to break. Just one broken link is enough to slow down this enormous machine. Protecting Tanzania is not just about preserving a beautiful land. It is about preserving an ancient story that continues to unfold. A story written with sun, dust, water, memories, instinct, and unceasing footsteps. And as long as herds of animals can still traverse the Serengeti, the wild heartbeat of Africa will not be silenced. A cold wind swept across the Puna Plateau before the sun had risen above the mountain ridge. On the dew-covered yellow grass, a young vicuña had just entered the world for the first time. Its legs trembled under its own weight. But the cold ground, the mountain wind, and its own fragile body were all pulling it down. And in the midst of that vast plateau, its life began with a chilling question. Will it be able to stand up in time? Its mother bent down, licked away the remaining moisture from its thin fur, then gently nudged its body as if giving a silent command. Stand up. Hold on, and learn to live before this land tests it for the first time. The young had to stand up before its body lost its warmth. It had to learn to breathe in the thin air that shortened each lung beat. It had to stay close to its mother before the herd began to move. And it had to do all of that before the puma understood that it was the newest weak point on the plateau. It staggered, stumbled, then rose again under its mother's watchful gaze. Not far away, on a dark rocky slope, a low figure pressed itself against the ground. A puma. It didn't roar. It wasn't in a hurry. It just lay still between the rocks and grass. Its golden eyes fixed on the vicuñas gathering around the newly begun life. For the young, this morning was a beginning. For the puma, it could be an opportunity. From that moment, the plateau opened up wider. The Peruvian Andes were not a place for life to enter slowly. It was part of the colossal Andes, where peaks tore through the sky. The Puna Plateau stretched out in the wind, Lake Titicaca lay cold under a thin light, and sheer cliffs held shadows longer than the ground below. From above, everything appeared majestic. But the closer one gets, the more that beauty resembles a test. During the day, the sun reddens the rocks and makes the air vibrate over the low grass. When night falls, the warmth dissipates cruelly, leaving a chill that creeps through fur, through skin, through every crevice in the rocks. Water isn't always nearby. The grass isn't always green enough to sustain the entire herd. And the air is so thin that every step must be calculated. Going too far exhausts the body. Stopping too long can turn it into a point of no return in the open field. In the Peruvian Andes, predators aren't the first enemies. Before the puma appears on the rocky slopes, before the condor soars across the sky, this very land begins to test every creature. Each species pays the price with its own adaptation. And for a young vicuña, that price begins with its very first steps. For there are no caves to hide in here, no place to linger, just minutes after birth. Those trembling legs must learn to stand and run. On the Puna Plateau, the vicuñas begin to stir in the cold morning light. From afar, they look slender, almost too fragile to belong to this land. Their pale brown fur blends into the dry grass. Their small necks stretch up in the cold wind. Their long legs glide across the bright rocks. But beneath that light, wind-like appearance lies a body designed for altitude. Their fur is among the finest in the world. Each strand so fine that it traps a layer of warm air against their skin, enough to withstand the Andean night that drains the heat from the earth. Their slender bodies allow them to traverse the vast plateau without expending too much energy. And the blood in their bodies continues to work tirelessly in the thin air, where each breath is shorter than usual. For an adult vicuña, everything is an advantage. But for a young one that has just learned to stand, all advantages still need to be learned. It has legs born to run, but it doesn't yet know which way to run. It has ears that always twitch in the wind, but it can't yet distinguish between the sound of grass and a warning. It has its mother right beside it, but on the open plateau, being near its mother isn't enough. It must learn its place in the pack. It must know when to stand still, when to turn away with everyone, even if it hasn't yet sensed danger. An adult at the edge of the pack suddenly lifts its head sharply. Its ears point toward the rocky slope. The whole pack freezes, not a roar. Not a single distinct step. Only the wind changes direction, carrying a scent the young one doesn't yet understand. Then the alarm sounds. The whole pack immediately changes direction in unison. The vicuña's safety circle lies in that very uniformity. When the whole herd rushes forward, it's difficult for a puma to separate a young from its mother. The young startle, a beat slower than its mother. Just one beat, but in the Peruvian Andes, one beat is enough to pull it out of the herd's protective circle. On the distant rocky slope, the puma hadn't yet charged out. It was simply observing silently. But from that moment, the young began its first lesson in life. The young vicuña didn't learn to live by being taught. It learned by each time the whole herd unexpectedly fled. On the rocky slope above the vicuña herd, the puma dissolved almost completely into the gray of the mountains. Its body pressed close to the ground. Its golden eyes never left the slightest movement below. In the Andes, the puma doesn't need a roar to make the entire plateau change its rhythm. It just needs to get close enough. At this altitude, the air is so thin that it doesn't allow for spraying. It costs nothing, not even a breath of energy. A long chase across the open plateau can consume more energy than the meat it gains. The puma's body is built for explosive leaps. Its powerful hind legs can propel it several meters in a single motion, not for a long-distance race. Therefore, it doesn't hunt with haste. It hunts with distance, with the wind. It moves against the wind so its scent doesn't drift toward the herd. It lowers its body, so its back doesn't protrude above the golden grass. Each step is so slow that the dust beneath its feet barely rises. Below, the vicuña herd continues to drift silently. The young cling to their mother, but their tiny legs haven't yet caught up with the herd's rhythm. That's what the puma is waiting for. Not the strongest, not the fastest. But a gap that has just opened between mother and child. A moment before the pack could close, the puma stopped behind a low rock. The wind shifted slightly. An adult vicuña at the edge of the pack suddenly lifted its head. Its ears perked up. The whole pack paused. For a very brief moment, the entire plateau seemed to hold its breath. The puma remained still. It hadn't charged out yet. Charging too soon, the pack would scatter. Waiting too long, the opportunity would vanish. The young cub veered away from its mother, enough for the puma to see. But not enough for it to be certain. Then an alarm tore through the air. The vicuña pack sprang from the ground like a pale brown wave. The cub startled, turning sharply back towards its mother. And the pack's encirclement closed. Faster than the charge, the puma was still gathering its strength for. The hunt hadn't even begun. It was over in a miscalculation. The puma poked its head out from behind the rock. Its eyes followed the receding herd, but its body didn't move to chase after them. For vicuñas are born for this thin sky. Their blood retains oxygen so well that they can gallop in. A place where a pursuer would soon run out of breath. At this altitude, even a hunter must know how to conserve their remaining strength. For a missed hunt isn't just a lost meal. It's a lost time. A lost energy, a lost opportunity, before the afternoon chill begins to creep down the plateau. Puma turned away, silently dissolving into the dark rock formations. In the Andes, strength doesn't lie in the first leap. It lies in knowing when not to waste that leap. On the cold slopes of the Andes, there is a deer that doesn't live by speed. It doesn't dash like a vicuña on the open plateau. It doesn't disappear in a long burst across the grassland. It has no claws, no fangs, and no wings to leave the ground when danger strikes. The taruca deer lives differently. It lives by precision. Amidst the gray rocks, low bushes and golden dust clinging to the mountain slopes, the taruca deer's body almost blends into the terrain. Its grayish-brown coat helps it blend in with the rocks, dry earth, and mountain shadows. From afar, it doesn't appear as a striking animal, but as a piece of the slope itself. That is the taruca deer's first line of defense. Not to outrun predators, but to be difficult to spot at first. Its body is also not built for the plains. The taruca deer has a sturdy, compact build, strong legs, and a much lower stance than many deer that live in open areas. Everything about its body seems designed for places where a single wrong step could cost it its life. It doesn't need long sprints. It needs balance. It needs to place its hooves in the right place. It needs to know which rocks are firm enough, which cracks to avoid, which ridges can support its weight. For the taruca deer, every step is a calculation. On the plains, a slip might only cause the young to collapse. But on the cliffs, a wrong step can pull the entire body off the rock. Here, survival doesn't begin with speed. It begins with placing one's feet. The taruca deer's hooves grip the slope with incredible firmness. They help it move across narrow ledges, sloping hillsides, and paths where many other species would have to stop. The more rugged the terrain, the clearer the taruca's advantage. For predators, high mountains are an obstacle. For the taruca, it is home. Young tarucas don't learn to run first. They learn the terrain first. They follow their mother, observing every point where her hooves touch. A chosen rock, a crack ignored, a turn memorized. The taruca's lessons aren't taught with loud noises or spectacular chases, but with quiet repetition in each step. The young must learn that not every higher place is safe. Not every steeper slope is good. A sufficiently steep slope can slow the puma down, but if it's too dangerous, the taruca itself can lose its balance. Therefore, what it learns is not just climbing, but choosing the right altitude, the right path, the right rock surface to turn the mountain to its advantage. That is bodily memory. A form of silent map etched into its muscles, hooves, and reflexes. The taruca deer understands the mountain not as a place to pass through, but as a survival system. It knows where it can stand, where it can turn around, where it is narrow enough to force a predator to slow down, where it is strong enough for a clumsy young deer to still cling to its mother. Therefore, strength. The true strength of the taruca deer doesn't lie in confrontation. It lies in turning the terrain into a shield. Against a predator like a puma, the taruca deer doesn't need to be stronger. It just needs to take the confrontation to a point where the advantage no longer lies with speed and a pounce. On narrow cliffs, each meter higher can take away a portion of the pursuer's strength. A missed leap there isn't just a lost opportunity. It can turn the predator itself into the one trapped between sharp rocks and a deep abyss. That's why the taruca deer doesn't live like the deer of the plains. It doesn't rely on large herds to conceal individual animals. It doesn't rely on explosive speed to escape every pursuit. It doesn't rely on strength to fight off claws. The taruca deer lives by understanding. Understanding the rocks, understanding the slopes. Familiar with the cold wind, the thin mist, and the narrow paths winding across the mountain slopes. In the Andes, where the air is thinner, the ground harsher, and the distance between safety and danger, sometimes only the width of a hoof, the taruca deer has chosen a very unique way of survival. It doesn't dominate the mountain by strength. It survives by becoming a part of the mountain. Its fur helps it blend into the rock. Its legs help it maintain balance. Its hooves help it grip on narrow ledges. Its memory allows it to read each path like an invisible map. And the young learn all of this from its mother, not in a single lesson, but through hundreds of cautious steps on the slopes. For the taruca deer, the mountain is not just a shelter. It is a school, a shield, a path to life, and in the most perilous moments, it becomes the most insidious weapon this deer possesses. On the high cliffs of the Andes, there is a bird that does not conquer the sky with speed. It does not hunt in short dives. It does not flap its wings incessantly to keep itself afloat. And it does not live by hurried flights from valley to valley. The Andean condor lives in a different way. It lives by the lift of the wind. From the ground, it appears as a giant shadow silently drifting across the high mountain sky. Its wings are outstretched, dark, almost without wasting a beat. With a wingspan that can exceed 3 meters, it is one of the largest flying birds in the world. But that size, however impressive, is still not enough to carry it far if it relies solely on muscular strength. The true strength of the Andean condor lies not in its flapping wings. It lies in its ability to read the sky. This bird relies on rising hot air currents from the mountain slopes, lifting currents along the cliffs and shifting winds between valleys. It must know where the rocks retain the warmth of the sun, where the air is rising, and when to spread its wings at the right moment to be lifted by the sky. Thanks to this, an Andean condor can glide for hours, covering very long distances with almost no energy expenditure. For the Andean condor, flying is not just a movement. It is an art of conserving energy. An art that demands almost absolute precision between the body, wings, and invisible wind currents. Just choosing the wrong air current or leaving the cliff at the wrong time. A heavy body will not easily regain altitude like smaller birds. Therefore, the Andean condor is not just about its large wings. It also possesses the ability to sense the sky. It knows when to keep its wings open, when to tilt its body slightly, when to let the wind do the heavy work. In the cold upper atmosphere of the Andes, it doesn't fight the air. It cooperates with the air, and it is this cooperation that transforms a large, heavy body, seemingly incapable of flight, into one of the most majestic figures in the South American sky. But the Andean condor is not only special in its flight, it is also special in its slow pace of life. This bird does not breed rapidly. A pair usually only raises one chick for a long period, and many pairs do not breed annually, but spaced out over several seasons. In return, the Andean condor has a very long lifespan, potentially living for decades, even more than half a century. This makes each individual incredibly valuable. For slow reproducing species like the Andean condor, if a generation disappears, the sky cannot be quickly filled again. Their survival is not built on sheer numbers, but on time, endurance, and the ability to survive for decades in the high mountains. And then there is their most insidious role. The Andean condor is a scavenger. It doesn't create death, but it appears after death has occurred. From above, thanks to its keen eyesight and long-range gliding ability, it can spot animal carcasses in wide valleys. Cold mountain slopes and harsh lands where life is always at the cost of endurance. When it lands, it does a job few other species can do as efficiently. It cleans up what remains. It prevents carcasses from lingering too long in the sun, wind, and among the mountain rocks. It brings the end of an organism back into the cycle of soil, grass, microorganisms, and new life. Therefore, the Andean condor is not a symbol of death. It is fading away. It is a symbol of continuity. Its enormous wings allow it to read the wind. Its long lifespan makes each individual an enduring part of the sky. Its slow breeding rate makes its existence far more fragile than many other species. And its role in cleaning up carcasses makes it an indispensable link in the high-altitude ecosystem. In the Andes, where sheer cliffs touch the cold sky, the vulture is more than just a bird of flight. It is a creature that knows how to ride the wind, how to wait for the right moment, and how to transform the vast expanse into its home. For it, the sky is not just a place to pass through. It is where its entire life is written, by the wind, by the altitude, and by the slow, silent circling of the mountain peaks. As the vultures retreated to a black dot against the vast sky, lower down, Among the highland wildflowers, a much smaller creature struggled with the same thin air. A giant hummingbird. It didn't have broad wings to let the wind carry it. It didn't have a large body to keep warm overnight. That tiny body lived to a completely different rhythm. Faster, more frantic, and more fragile. Even as the world's largest hummingbird, it lived on a fragile flame, fueled almost incessantly by nectar. Amidst the cold Andean winds, it had to keep itself suspended above the delicate flowers clinging to the mountainside. Its wings vibrated incessantly, so fast that it almost blurred into a hazy layer in the light. Every second of flight burned energy. Every sip of nectar drew a little more fuel for the small flame. It needs the right season. It needs a sun warm enough for the petals to open before its body dries up. A hummingbird cannot go hungry for long. It needs flowers. It needs nectar. After the dry season, the flower bushes on the mountainside in a place where every drop of nectar is energy. Flying in the wrong direction can be too costly. The bird swoops from one flower to another. The sun begins to sink behind the mountain range, sucks nectar, then springs back into the air. There is no time to rest long. A cold shadow creeps up from the valley. The flowers gradually close. The bird is still searching. It needs one more nectar sucking before night falls. Because when darkness falls on the plateau, it cannot continue to burn as it did in the daytime. To survive the freezing night, the tiny body had to lower itself, slowing its heart rate, so that its body temperature nearly matched the surrounding cold, bringing life to the lowest possible level. A sleep so deep that it almost disappeared from the world, what scientists call temporary hibernation. Not because it was weak, but because in the Andes, conserving energy was also a way of fighting. By morning, when the first rays of sunlight touched the bushes, that small flame had to flare up again. In the Andes, even the smallest beauty came at the cost of enormous energy. As the sun rose higher over the Andes slopes, the rocks began to change. After a long, freezing night, the cold gradually receded from the gray surface. The sunlight streamed down, seeping into the rocks, transforming the dry, hard ridges into ovens exposed to the highland wind. For Andean lizards and snakes, it was more than just a new morning. That's when the body awakens. They don't retain heat internally like vicuñas. They don't constantly burn energy to maintain body temperature like birds. Their bodies depend on heat from the outside world. The sun, rocks, crevices, shade, all become part of the survival system. In the Peruvian Andes, where day and night can be as distinct as two seasons, this turns the lives of reptiles into a precise thermal equation. Too cold, muscles slow down. Too hot, the body can become overloaded. Hiding too long, they don't get warm enough to forage. Coming out too early, they're not quick enough to escape danger. So highland lizards and snakes don't just live on rocks. They red rocks. A small lizard emerges from a crevice when the sun is just strong enough. Its entire scaly body is still sluggish after the cold night, but it doesn't dart away immediately. It lay pressed against the warming rock, letting each ray of sunlight draw heat into its body. Its dark scales helped it absorb light more quickly. It was a small advantage, but at such extreme altitudes, sometimes just a little warmth could determine whether a day could even begin. To run, it needed warmth. To hunt small prey, it needed warmth. To digest, react, escape, and survive, it needed to borrow energy from the sun. For Andean reptiles, sunlight wasn't a setting. Sunlight was fuel. High-altitude snakes lived by that same rhythm, but in a quieter way. They lay close to the rocks, their long bodies coiled low, almost without revealing any unnecessary movement. Each slither consumed energy, and where warmth was precious, every movement had to have a purpose. They couldn't waste energy. They couldn't rely on long bursts of speed. They cannot move around freely as they would in warmer, lower regions. In the Andes, a reptile's day is fragmented by temperature. Morning is when they seek warmth. Midday is when their bodies are most active. As evening falls, the rocks cool down rapidly, and the chances of survival in the crevices close. During the day, they must seek warmth. At night, they must escape the cold. Therefore, their behavior is an art of thermoregulation. When cold, they bask on bright rocks. When the temperature rises too high, they retreat into dark crevices, under rocks, or in small, shady spots. The environment doesn't just surround them. The environment controls their life rhythm hour by hour. Even the reproduction methods of some highland reptiles bear the mark of the cold climate. In places where eggs are difficult to develop if left between cold rocks and biting winds, Many species don't simply lay their eggs in the environment like their lowland relatives. Some species keep embryos inside their bodies longer. To protect the developing life in a more stable place before venturing into the harsh world. That's not weakness, that's adaptation. Because in the high mountains, the cold isn't just a season. It's selective pressure. It forces the body to change, forces behavior to be precise. Forces each generation to find a way to begin life in a place where the temperature can always turn against them. But the sun, though a source of life, is never free. When a lizard emerges from a crevice in the rocks to bask in the sun, it also steps onto an open stage. On the open rock, there's no tall grass to cover it, no herd to blend in with. There's not much time to hesitate. A tiny body exposed to the sunlight may be saved from the cold by the sun. But that same light also makes it visible. That's the paradox of the Andean reptiles. They need to expose themselves to survive, but the more exposed they are, the more vulnerable they become. Therefore, every action must balance two risks. Too much cold is ineffective, but too much exposure is dangerous. A nearby crevice, a sufficiently warm slab of rock, a patch of shade that has just cooled down. All can be the boundary between survival and extinction. Here, the strength of reptiles lies not in size. Not in their roar, not in their ability to dominate a vast area. It lies in the subtlety of their small bodies that listen to the temperature. They know how to wait for the sun. They know how to utilize the warmth of the rocks. They know how to conserve every movement. They know how to retreat into the shadows before the cold returns. On the slopes of the Andes, lizards and snakes not only fend off predators. They fend off the passage of light. With each morning, their bodies are reactivated by the sun. With each passing afternoon, that opportunity gradually faded on the cooling rocks. And in that harsh world, the sun was both their source of life and their greatest challenge. It gave them the warmth to run, hunt, digest, and survive. But it also dragged them out of their hiding places, placing their tiny bodies under the watchful gaze of the Andean sky. Lake Titicaca stretched out beneath the thin sky like a cold mirror set against the roof of the Andes. At this altitude, even the water was unlike that of the lowlands. It was colder, poorer in oxygen, and more demanding of any creature forced to live its entire life within it. Beneath the surface, amidst the gently swaying seaweed and the dark mud at the bottom of the lake, a body slowly emerged. the Titicaca giant frog, not a sound, not a long leap onto the shore. It's just a heavy creature, almost entirely of the underwater world. What sets it apart isn't its speed, but its very body. Its wrinkled skin, folded into large creases around its body and legs. Makes it look like it's wearing an oversized coat. But in Lake Titicaca, that's not superfluous. It's how it breathes. In this cold, oxygen-poor water, the Titicaca frog takes in oxygen directly through its skin. The more creases, the larger the surface area in contact with the water. The more surface area in contact with the water, the higher the chance of gathering enough oxygen to survive. In other words, it has turned its own skin into a lung open to the world. And when the water around it runs low on oxygen, it has a special trick. It gently bobs its body up and down as if doing push-ups, allowing a continuous stream of fresh water to slide across its skin, bringing little by little more oxygen back to its body. An extraordinary solution, but that's also its greatest weakness. A young individual lies at the bottom in the murky water near the shore. Suspended dirt particles drift across its wrinkled skin, hitting directly the very place where it was born to sustain life. It cannot escape this environment. It cannot fly away. Everything that passes through that water passes through its body. If the water changes, its entire body pays the price. And the water is changing. Waste. Untreated wastewater. Garbage washed ashore. Ecological changes that a frog cannot avoid on its own. For many species, danger can be seen from afar. A shadow overhead, a sound in the grass. A strange smell carried on the wind. But for the Titicaca frog, the threat can be invisible. No teeth, no claws, no sound, just silently dissolving into the very water it needs to breathe. The baby frog stirred slightly, its thin skin rippling in the cold water. It was still alive, still taking in oxygen through its folds. It continues the way its ancestors did long before humans knew of this lake, but now every breath is a gamble. Because of this, the frogs that once dominated the lake bed are now critically endangered. Their numbers decline rapidly with each changing season. When Lake Titicaca closes beneath the cold water, the Andes Plateau retains another world of water. But here, the water isn't deep blue and dark. It's thin, salty, reflecting the sky like a mirror trembling between wind and salt. On those plateau lakes, a few pink dots begin to appear. Then more. Then a whole band of color bursts forth amidst the white expanse of salt and the cold of the Andes. Flamingos. Flames of pink stand silently on the shallow water. They don't hunt, they don't ambush. They don't need explosive power to survive. Their lives lie in things so small that they are barely visible to the naked eye. Algae, microorganisms, tiny living things floating in the salt water. The flamingo's distinctive curved beak bends down, filtering through the water's surface, extracting the smallest nutrients from a seemingly impoverished world. And it is from this tiny world that it feeds on its color, that vibrant pink isn't innate, but comes from the pigment particles in the algae and tiny organisms it filters. Its long legs carry it through shallow waters where few other species can stay for long. And the large flock provides another layer of security. More eyes to watch over, more bodies to keep the rhythm of the community. But that beauty is preserved by something incredibly fragile. The water level. When the breeding season arrives, the salt lakes become nurseries for the next generation. Flamingos don't nest in trees. They don't hide their young in caves. They build small mounds of mud that rise above the water's surface. Up there, amidst the cold wind and dry salt, the eggs are held slightly above the surface of the lake. Just enough to avoid the water, just enough to embrace life. Then the hatchlings are born, not pink, but tiny, fluffy gray masses standing precariously between the mud, the wind, and the harsh sunlight of the highlands. In this place, the cold is unforgiving. Many nights, the shallow water freezes right around their feet. And they must wait for the morning sun to melt the ice before the whole flock can move. If the water recedes too soon, the nest is left in the dry mud. If the water rises too deep, the nesting ground disappears. And if the lake dries up, the whole flock is forced to leave the place that once sheltered the new generation. A hatchling steps down from the mud mound, its feet still clumsy on the slightly cracked, salty soil. Behind it, the adults still bend down to filter water, maintaining the rhythm of life for the whole flock with a quiet and persistent work. But all that movement can only continue if the lake remains. At the depth that life requires, In the Andes, even a flock of birds capable of painting the horizon pink must entrust its future to something cruelly simple: water, to live or to die. But water in the Andes is not just found in salt lakes. At another altitude, water rises as mist, hanging on leaves, condensing on moss and transforming entire mountain slopes into a damp, cold labyrinth. That is the cloud forest, the green breath of the Andes. Amidst that mist, there are paths that do not lie on the ground. They lie high above, connecting branch to branch, from one canopy to the next. And on those green paths, the Peruvian golden-tailed woolly monkey moves. Its thick fur helps it withstand the damp, cold climate of the mountain forest. Its strong limbs and long, clinging tail make it almost born to live among the canopy. For this monkey, the tail is not just an extension of the body, it's a fifth arm. The tail wraps around a branch, providing balance, anchoring the body in midair and helping it reach clusters of fruit out of reach. The golden-tailed woolly monkey doesn't just move through the forest. It reads the forest with its body, a branch strong enough, a canopy close enough. A moss-covered trunk safe enough for the whole troop to cross without touching the ground. They live in troops, calling to each other in the mist, moving together through the layers of trees and remembering where the fruit has ripened. In the cloud forest, the troop's memory is a living map. Their diet consists of many forest fruits. And that's what makes the golden-tailed woolly monkey a silent gardener of the Andes. When they eat the fruit, they carry the seeds through long stretches of forest. Then those seeds fall elsewhere, far from the mother tree, opening the way for a new seedling. A forest fruit is eaten, but a forest can be replanted. Therefore, this monkey doesn't just live in the forest. It helps the forest continue to live, but its strength is also its weakness. Yellow-tailed woolly monkeys need continuous forests. They need interconnected canopies like green bridges overhead. When the forest is fragmented, their paths disappear. A gap below ground might only be a few dozen meters. But for a species that lives in the canopy, it can be a chasm. No more branches to cling to, no more leafy shade to hide in. No more familiar routes for the troop to travel through the next fruit season. When the forest is cut off, the yellow-tailed woolly monkey doesn't just lose its habitat. It loses its map, and the forest loses one of its most important seed carriers. Protecting the Peruvian yellow-tailed woolly monkey is not just about protecting a species. Rare primates. It's about protecting the high-altitude paths of the cloud forest, protecting the seeds carried through the mist, and protecting the self-regeneration of the cool, damp green forest on the Andes slopes. When the canopy was still connected, the yellow-tailed woolly monkey could still move through the mist as part of the forest. But when the forest is cut off, not only do the trees disappear, the invisible paths in the low Andes sky disappear with them. From the Puna Plateau to Lake Titicaca, from the pinkish salt lakes to the mist-shrouded cloud forests, the species of the Andes have never survived by luck. They survive because they have learned to keep warm on cold nights, learned to utilize every bit of oxygen in the thin air, learned where there is grass, where there is water, where they can run and where they must stop. But today, that mountain region is changing its rhythm. The ice melts sooner. Streams come faster, then disappear faster. The grasslands dry up sooner. The flowering season is out of sync with the tiny wings. Salt lakes may dry up prematurely before the young birds have a chance to grow. Cloud forests are being cut off, leaving old paths no longer leading to safety. What is changing is not just the landscape, but the value of all old lessons. A young bird born today still learns from its mother. But if the land changes faster than memory is passed down, then even the most correct lesson of yesterday may no longer be enough for tomorrow. All these species are different heartbeats within the same large body. The Andes. If one heartbeat disappears, that body will no longer breathe as before. And if humanity wants to preserve this world, the first thing to protect is not just one species, but the fragile bonds that have helped this entire mountain range survive thousands of seasons.